Even though I've been expecting it for a while, OpenAI's Sora has really taken the world by storm in both a positive and a negative way, and even surprised me how quickly it actually happened. But one of the most important aspects of Sora, and something I believe has gone under-discussed, is the effect of compute power on Sora's understanding of the world, and this actually factors into how Tesla's Full Self-Driving 12 works as well. So let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I want to talk about a few videos that OpenAI put out with their technical research paper, which again is pretty light on the details, and how this relates to Tesla and their Full Self-Driving 12, which is actually going out to wide release. No, I don't have it yet, or else you'd be watching me doing a first drive on FSD Beta 12. So hopefully within the next couple days. If you haven't subscribed, definitely subscribe now so you can catch that. And also, if you haven't seen my original hot take on Sora, you should definitely check that out as well. I'll put that up in the corner. So today's video is relatively speculative because we only really have one data point that OpenAI gave us, but I'm going to sort of, expand on what I think this means and why it's so important and why I think it should have been discussed a little bit more. I've been watching a lot of reviews of Sora, and people are really focusing on the social implications, and I think there are a lot of those. It's a very scary thing, and I think that, OpenAI has very intentionally put this out as kind of a look what's coming kind of deal so that the population, the world, can basically come to grips with how much reality is changing. But what I want to talk about specifically is the title of the OpenAI research paper and how that relates to compute and how important compute is to reconstructing the world, which is a very significant aspect of artificial general intelligence, and of course why that also relates to Tesla and their full self-driving efforts. So first of all, once again, the title of their research paper, Video Generation Models as World Simulators. So they're very specifically saying that what they're doing is not generating video, but generating worlds. They're creating synthetic worlds. They're simulating that internal to something, and then the video is sort of the output of that 3D simulated world. And that's a really important factor here in terms of thinking about the way OpenAI is considering this technology. This is not something that's generating videos, this is something that's generating worlds, and the videos are coming out of those worlds. And before we get to the videos, just a really quick recap of how they're actually doing this. Again, very light on details, but turning visual data into patches. We take inspiration from large language models which acquire generalist capabilities by training on internet scale data. So data is king. You want lots and lots of data. Probably the Shutterstock agreement that OpenAI made is a very important part of Sora, but we don't know for sure. Anyway, the success of the large language model paradigm is enabled in part by the use of tokens that elegantly unify diverse modalities of text. If you haven't seen, Andre Karpathy just did a whole video on tokenization. Excellent video. I've only gotten through half of it so far. It's pretty dense and I have to take it all in. But anyway, it's a really good video. Even if you don't want to play along and actually write the code, I highly recommend watching it to see the pitfalls that can happen with verbal tokenization. And here we're moving on to spatio-temporal tokenization as well. Anyway, back to the text. By the use of tokens that elegantly unify diverse modalities of text, code, math, and various natural languages. In this work, we consider how generative models of visual data can inherit such benefits. Whereas LLMs have text tokens, Sora has visual patches. Patches have previously been shown to be an effective representation for models of visual data, which is true going, all the way back to transformers being used for single images. We find that patches are a highly scalable and effective representation for training generative models on diverse types of video and images. And then we have a quick sort of schematic representation of how this all works, and they say at a high level we turn videos into patches by first compressing videos into a lower dimensional latent space and subsequently decomposing that representation into space-time patches. So if you haven't seen my video on transformers being used for spatial type of stuff with single frame images, you can check that out up here. I'll leave a link to that. I think you'll find it highly valuable, and again, I don't want to go into a ton of detail, but what they've added to that is is time, basically. So instead of just patching out things in space, they're patching out things in time as well, and they're doing it mostly in the latent space, not in the original pixel representation, because not only are images very large, but then when you string them together at 24 or 30 frames a second, you're talking about an immense amount of data that this neural network would have to train and learn on. But what you can do is you can encode that, you can reduce it down to a latent space that is much easier for the neural network to train on, and then it outputs these patches in a spatio-temporal sort of manner, in other words, a video when it gets done. And also critically importantly here, we've got diffusion models acting in concert with transformer models. So diffusion models are taking noise and denoising something based on a text input or an image input, or in this case, a video input, and turning that from just, random noise that just looks like static on an old TV screen into something that is an actual image or a video or text for that matter. And here, of course, we can see a quick visual representation of that. We've got a lot of noise with a barely amount of image in there. So this would be taking something that already existed, then you're denoising it, then you're denoising it. And instead of just a single image, you're denoising that over time to get consistency between frames so that you don't have lots of flickering and things like that. So that's the basic way that this all works. And now we get to the crux of what I want to talk about here. So we've got a base compute video over here with a creepy, like it looking thing, right? This dog that's sort of morphing into stuff, looks scary as hell. Then 4x compute, unfortunately, we have no idea what 4x means, but the base compute, that's one amount of compute, whatever that is, however many flops or tops. Then we've got 4 times that amount. So if it was like, 1 teraflop or something like that, it would be 4. And then if we multiply that by 8 to 32 times compute, so 32 teraflops or, whatever that amount of compute is, when we get there, when we move from this base amount of compute to 4x, we get to something that's really attractive, right? But it's very, very soft. And you can see that there's a lot of detail missing and it's not perfect by any means. And when you get to 32, it looks pretty darn good. It looks like something that you could definitely see in reality. So looking again at these videos, in the first one, you can see there's a lot of camera motion, and actually it's pretty reasonable. There's a lot of, fuzzy, noisy kind of stuff. But generally speaking, the three-dimensionality of the world already appears to be working correctly, but the subject matter, which obviously there was something like a Shiba Inu playing in the snow with a woman with a red coat and wearing a blue cap or something like that. That was sort of the text prompt that was there. And so you can see the basics of it there, and there's a lot of camera motion, which proves that it already has an understanding of the world, but it doesn't really have an understanding of dog and keeping a dog consistent and not messing it up completely and making it look super creepy. Then when we turn to 4x compute, so again, 4 times the amount of compute that's applied to this, we get to the image of the dog. The image is much more consistent, looks much better. You can see the woman in the background with the red coat. The camera is locked. If you look at the trees in the background, they look very, very cartoony. And there's, a lot of fuzz and stuff like that up in this front area, so it's not particularly good looking. And everything is super, super soft. So there's not a lot of detail, and that's an artifact of the diffusion model diffusing. So what that model is doing is it's removing noise, removing noise, removing noise, but that tends to soften things up if you don't give it enough steps, enough compute to diffuse the model properly to get to a state where you can see more of the details. So then, when you multiply by 8 up to 32 times compute, you can then see that we have a pretty significant understanding of what's going on. We've got a very realistic looking, woman with a red coat, although there is a little bit of unusualness with that jacket potentially going through her leg or something. We've got a very nice looking blue beanie, slow motion. We've got a very attractive dog. We've got, intermittent grass and snow and everything. And we've also gone back to some camera motion. If you look at this middle one, there's no camera motion. So it's sacrificing some of that camera motion. Here, the camera motion is much more subtle, but there is camera motion again. So again, making us understand that we're looking at a three-dimensional understanding of the world, and it can track a camera around that world because it's done world simulation. So this is all very revealing in terms of the importance of compute to doing a proper world simulation. Okay, so now I'm going to stop these videos because I think it's going to drive us all crazy if they just keep playing back and back while I'm talking about this. But what are we talking about by compute, first of all? My guess at this point is that what we're talking about is the number of diffusion steps. So again, with a still frame image, what you would do is say maybe 100 steps to diffuse an image, right? So you would start off with noise and you would tell it you want a Shiba Inu. I think that's the breed of dog. Anyway, dog with blue cap, frolicking in the snow, woman holding the dog's leash or something like that with a red jacket on and trees in the background, whatever you want the prompt to be. So that's the kind of thing. And you might have full noise with this clip text that is being injected into the noise to tell it what it's supposed to be as it denoises it. And then it could denoise. Let's actually start instead of with, let's actually do 32 steps in one step because I'm not going to do math this early in the morning. But basically the base compute, you might imagine the diffusion step was 1. Now, more than likely it's going to be something like 30 or something like that. But again, we'll just say 1. So that's the amount of compute. So it's going from noise to an image. It has to do it very, very rapidly, and it doesn't have a lot of time in terms of diffusion steps to figure out how to recreate this world. If we go to 4x, then what we're looking at is instead of 1 step to diffuse, it's actually got 4. So it goes from noise to a bit less noise to a bit less noise to a bit less noise to the actual final output. And then when you go to 32, it's 32, 31, 30, So it goes noise, and it can denoise it much more slowly. Each one of those steps takes approximately the same amount of compute time. So what you can see here, and what my guess is that this diffusion is being run for a longer period of time. So that would be their amount of compute they're talking about. And that would basically translate into the number of steps in terms of the diffusion. So you're going from whatever the base amount is, and again, maybe it's 10 steps of diffusion or something like that, and then you go to 40, and then you go to 320 steps of diffusion. As you work through more and more diffusion layers, if you give it more time to denoise things, it gets to an understanding of the world that is more and more and more specific. In the beginning, even with the base level of compute, you can see it's actually reasonable, right? It's a creepy as hell looking dog, but you get the idea of dog, you get the idea of woman with a red coat in the background when she's in the shot, you get the idea of three-dimensionality because there's parallax and everything. There's the idea of snow. There's the idea of trees, bare trees, because it's wintertime, of course. So, you've got all of that kind of stuff that's already in there. But as you add more diffusion steps and give it more compute time, it's able to understand the world better and better and better and more specifically, getting to the point where it's very, very, realistic to the extent that if you weren't really paying attention, you would assume it was a real video in the right-hand column. But of course, if we look at this carefully, we can see there's something wrong with her red coat. It looks like her leg is actually sticking through it. And I think that's supposed to be a leash she's holding, but it's not particularly a leash. So by no means is this perfect yet, but these are details. The fact that it's able to do a slow panning back and forth, a tracking, and again, I'll play this just so you can see it because it's pretty subtle. But you can see the trees in the background moving, so there's like kind of a camera pan that's going on. So that's pretty cool. And there again, there's like maybe the head is sticking through the blue cap at this point. I don't know. So there are mistakes to this. It is not perfect by any means, but the sort of quantum leap that was made by OpenAI when they showed this off is really, really remarkable. Going from what we saw with, everybody shows the Will Smith eating spaghetti meme video from only, I think, a year ago or maybe 14 months ago. It was not that long ago. It's absolutely insane that we moved from that, which is just creepy as hell, and he's like, constantly changing and stuff like that, and spaghetti's going in and out of his mouth is super creepy, to the point where we have something where if you're not paying close attention, you would believe that that was a real video. And then what is the next thing, the next year, the next couple, as the 2-minute papers always says, 2 papers down the line, what happens in the next 2 iterations of this software? We're talking about pretty crazy stuff going on here. But much more important than the visual aspect in my mind is the 3D world simulation that's happening here. This is showing an understanding, a building up just from watching videos. It doesn't have any other interaction with the world aside from text, of course, but text is already a pre-abstracted version of reality. But in terms of reality, what we're doing is we're giving this model essentially one eye. It doesn't even have binocular vision. It can't see the world in 3 dimensions like most of us do who have 2 eyes. It sees the world with 1 eye, and it can only see videos. It can't feel the world. It can't, move around in the world, anything like that. But already it's able to reconstruct a 3-dimensional reality of this world. So now is where we get back to Tesla and what they've been doing. Of course, Elon has confirmed what I said. I posted something on X about how really cool this was and how Tesla's been doing this, and he confirmed that. So it was very cool that he wrote back about that. But anyway, as of a year ago or so, according to Elon and according to Walter Isaacson's book and the research and all of that kind of stuff, Tesla was doing this. It just looked much more boring. But I would suggest that what Tesla has in terms of their reconstruction of the world is much more sophisticated than even what we're seeing with OpenAI. Again, not visually very impressive because the video is just video of like the 8 cameras around the car driving, and the cameras themselves have kind of a log profile, so they're not very colorful or anything. So they look boring.
And since this is all just predicting future, RGB values, the ontology is quite general. You can like throw any video clip from driving or from YouTube or from your own phone. Anything can be used to train this general dynamics model of the world.
But essentially what you're able to do is say, from these 8 cameras that give you a 360-degree view of the world, reconstruct the world. So I'm giving you 2 seconds of time. what do the next 2 seconds of time look like? And it's able to do that. And this is something that OpenAI's Sora can do. It can take a video and it can extend that video. So you could also have a video of your dog playing and say like, oh, I wish it was like 2 seconds longer. And you could give it that video and say, make this video 2 seconds longer, and it would extend that out. So same kind of thing that Tesla's full self-driving generative AI is able to do. Again, it's not doing that in the car. That's not part of the inference engine, but it's part of what the inference engine could do if you repurposed it to do that. So it's something they're doing in terms of their research. But Tesla is not limited to single eye video footage. It's able to ingest 8 cameras, a 360-degree view of the world, plus inertial measurement units. It's able to understand how it's, moving back and forth in the world, acceleration, jerk, velocity, all of that kind of stuff. It knows that as well. So that is another mode of input it's able to understand. So my contention here is that what Tesla is able to create is a much more sophisticated world model. It's able to understand the three-dimensional world in an even more sophisticated way than what OpenAI's Sora is demonstrating to us. And that's the critical point. The eye candy of the fact that you can generate a video is super, super cool, and I think it's amazing, and what OpenAI has done is absolutely amazing. But the more important fundamental aspect of this is that these two technologies are recreating the world. They're doing what we and what mice and what cats and dogs and a hawk or whatever, we're doing what biological creatures are doing. It's able to reconstruct a three-dimensional understanding of the world from nothing but just seeing it. It's just coming in. All of that information comes into us as babies or, as a baby bird or whatever, we just take in this stuff and we have an awful lot of genetic programming inside of us, but we're able to ingest all of that and create this world model. If you have had a child or even been around a child that's like a kind of a toddler, 1 or 2 years old, and they sit at their high chair when they're eating and they keep dropping stuff off the side and then they get mad at you if you don't pick it up, right? That really annoying kind of thing. That's a child like learning what the world is. They're like, drop it, it goes down. Drop it, it goes down. And I've said this, I think, a few times on this channel, but if you really want to blow a kid's mind at that age and they have never seen a helium balloon before, give them a helium balloon. They'll drop it, they'll expect it to go down, and it goes up, and they just go, you see their minds explode, right? So they learn about what a light object is and what can happen if you have lighter than air kind of stuff. And of course, like I said, even something as simple as a mouse or something like that kind of understands this stuff. But this is something that has been entirely impossible for computers of whatever kind of thing you're talking about, just hard coding or classical AI kind of stuff or modern neural networks, whatever those kinds of entities are, they have never been able to understand the world at even the level of something like a mouse. And now we're seeing that definitely they are able to understand the world at that level. So what in the end does this tell us? Well, the first thing it tells us is that full self-driving, if it really is as sophisticated as I think it is building a world model. It has an understanding of the universe. And this has been discussed before. This is not something that I'm like, nobody else is talking about this. Even Elon has said that, and certainly the researchers at Tesla AI have talked about this, that it's building a world model from the ground up. It's learning how to read signs. It's learning what the world is, how the universe works. It has a lot of information because, again, it has 8 cameras, so it's not just stereoscopic, it's octoscopic or whatever. It's able to really, really see the world and reconstruct a 3-dimensional version of it. Even the 11.4 that I have right now has that parking assist thing where it goes down to like the eagle eye sort of view of what you're doing when you're parking and driving at low speeds, and it's pretty darn accurate now. And that's because it's constructing a 3D model of the world internally, and when you're going slowly, it can show you that, and it can say you're, this far away and it's getting a little bit yellow and then orange and then red as you get close to the curb or something. So this stuff is not brand new with version 12, but version 12 has essentially stripped out all the rest of the old hard coding thing, and it's doing that end to end. And of course, we're seeing Sora do that as well with just video data. And again, it's essentially having one eye because you can't even see 3-dimensionality in this video data because it's just a 2D video, and it's still able to reconstruct the world. It's sort of trapped in a room, and before it can only take in like typing. Someone would type to it, the old Turing test, right? If somebody would type in and say like, are you a human? It would be like, sure, I'm a human or something. But it was very abstracted from the world. I think about Samuel Beckett's Unnameable, which is an amazing novel. It's really, really tough to read, but it's a guy who's sitting in a room. And by the way, he's the famous playwright who did Waiting for Godot. But before he wrote plays, he wrote a lot of novels. And in Unnameable, this guy is sort of sitting in a room, trapped in a room with only his thoughts. There's kind of no input around there. And so I think about like, large language models like ChatGPT and stuff like that. being this thing, it gets input from the external world only in the form of text, and then it talks to itself. It doesn't really know what the world is. So even though it's only monocular vision seeing these videos, ChatGPT has been, it can see the world now, a much more sophisticated version of the world because it has access to some vision. And then, of course, you can add in binocular stuff, and you can add in audio and things like that, and you can eventually get to the point where you have a more and more and more sophisticated version of the world that it's able to model. But because Full Self-Driving 12 has access to 8 cameras and an inertial measurement unit, it already has a huge leg up on what OpenAI's version of the world is, and it should understand the world in a much more sophisticated way than what Sora can do. And then we can add on top of that Optimus and many, many other robot manufacturers right now, including Sanctuary AI. They're working on AGI through embodied robots. That's their specific claim. But anyway, all of these robotics companies are working with multimodal input, and I did a video on that yesterday. If you haven't seen that, check that out. But anyway, they're working on this multimodal input of like haptics or pressure sensors, not haptics, but pressure sensors and vision and audio and potentially even temperature sensors, things like that. So they can take in all of this information and they can fuse it all together to create an incredibly sophisticated model of how the world works. Again, they're not solving like, general relativity equations or something. The ability to do that would be a really, really cool outcome of something like that's just a chatbot or something. But what they're able to do is not do it via equations, but do it the same way that a human does. You can go throw a baseball or something like that. You can play catch with a friend of yours. You don't have to be able to solve Newton's motions of equation in order to do that. You just figured it out from your childhood, right? As you were born, you kind of learned how all of that stuff works. So this is the same thing that robots of whatever stripe you're talking about, if it's a four-wheeled robot like a car or a four-limbed robot like a human being or a humanoid robot, whatever it is, it's learning a model of reality. And the important part from OpenAI's paper here is that what they're saying is that the more compute you throw at this, the more time, the more steps you give it to recreate the world from its sort of generalized understanding, the more sophisticated that understanding of the world is. And that's a really, really cool point. And just as a final addendum, Elon had talked about last year, sometime around July-ish, maybe August of 2023, he discussed how Tesla is moving away from only using transformers to using some sort of a blend where they're using diffusion models and other things like that. So clearly OpenAI is not the only one who's been kind of moving towards this more integrated approach of integrating transformers and diffusion models, which again are the two leading candidates for getting to AGI. And the even better opportunity is to blend both of these together. So they've been working on this as well. And what that means is that we're talking about these entities, whether it's OpenAI's Sora or Tesla's Full Self-Driving or many other companies with their robotics and everything, they're getting to a point where these things are getting to be, let's say, as smart as a mouse or something like that right now. They can navigate through the world. They have a basic understanding of the universe, and they're much more sophisticated in terms of abstract reasoning. But I'm just talking about in terms of like maneuvering through the world. They're on the order of that, probably something along that, between a mouse and a cat or something. It's an interesting combination of creatures. But anyway, they're like that, but we're also at this hockey stick moment where we're getting exponential increase in their capability. So you might be like, well, okay, that's not very human at this point. They're only like that smart. But we could be looking within another 12 to 24 months of them being smarter than the best human athlete you've ever seen or something, right? So that they become superhuman, not in terms of their reasoning capability, but in terms of their interaction with the universe. That's the part we're looking for, partially for video, that's cool and everything, but I think even more importantly for navigating the world, for a full self-driving computer to be able to navigate the world in a very sophisticated manner that's actually better than the best human driver. Think of your favorite race car driver or something. It will be better than that. And of course, also we'll have humanoid robots that are able to navigate the world and interact with the world in an incredibly sophisticated manner by that point as well. So we're not looking at that far away before we have superhuman capabilities in these bots because they're able to model and understand the world. And if it's only a matter of compute and the amount of compute you can throw at it, then because of Moore's law and better algorithms and throwing gigantic data centers at things and all of that kind of stuff, it is only a matter of time before these things become better than humans. And that's both exciting and terrifying. All right, so like I said, this is highly speculative. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have other ideas or if you think I'm just totally wrong, that's possible as well. Again, be constructive about that, but that's all good. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe because it's very helpful for the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.